Today's book review is Running is My Therapy, Relieve Stress and Anxiety, Fight Depression, Ditch Bad Habits, and Live Happier. It is by Scott Douglas. I have lost the cover, but I'll have a photo of it. And it's a powerful book. And to start the book review, I want to just give a personal story, and then I'll hop into the actual review itself of the book. But I'll link in the comments when the review starts if you want to just skip to that. But to start, depression is a very powerful and debilitating disease. Estimates are, the book talks about this, that about 16 million people, or 7% of the adult population, has at least one depressive episode every year. And what a depressive episode is, as it's defined, it is based upon the clinical definition. So there are a series of certain factors that you have to exhibit, and the episode has to last for at least 2 weeks, which is a long time. Depression, of course, can have ranges. It can have the more clinical definition, which is what we just discussed, and it can go to even more mild things, where maybe only last for a day or two. And if you take that broader description of depression, I think that the number of adults who suffer from depression could be twice that high. It could be 15% of the population, or 32 million people. The point is, it is a very common disease that affects a lot of people. There's a bunch of reasons for that. But where I fit into this is that I count myself as a member of that population that suffers from at least some form of mild depression. And I feel like I've had depression all my life. But notably, for me, it happened in my college years and in my early 20s. And it would always just come on sudden. It was often triggered by some obstacle to whatever goal I was trying to go achieve. And I think it's important to realize that understanding what I was trying to go do. So I grew up in a small town in Georgia. And for me, my sole focus was to do what it took to get out of that small town. Nothing wrong with living there, but for me, I wanted to go on, to see the world, to go do bigger things, so I thought. My best path for making that happen was through school, was through education. Worked very hard in high school to get good grades, to get into a good college. That was the focus. And so that's what I did. That's what I went to go achieve. But when I got to college is when I feel like I hit my first severe depressive episodes. And each time the episode was triggered, again, by something that would knock me off this path. Because the goal now was to get good grades, to work hard in college, to get a good job, to get a good career, to make money, to be able to go do these things and to establish myself. That is what I believe the journey was. But college is hard. And I was an engineer. Engineering is hard. And I was a chemical engineer. And chemical engineering is particularly hard. And I went to Georgia Tech, which is a very hard engineering school. And as a result, there were plenty of stumbling blocks along the way. They could be academic or they could be personal. It could be a breakup. It could be humiliation. It could be rejection. Whatever it was, something would happen. And it would trigger one of these episodes. And it could last for a day. It could last for 2 days. But one time it lasted the whole semester where I dropped every single class and just kind of sat in my room. And the way these episodes are, I heard this story. It might have actually been in this book, but I heard a really good description of what it's like to have a depressive episode. And the description is, let's say you are sitting on the couch and you are thirsty. What do you go do? Well, most people would just say, well, I'll get up and go to the refrigerator and get a glass of water. Right? That makes sense. But if you're going through one of these depressive episodes, like I would go to every so often when something would occur, if you're sitting on the couch and you get thirsty, all you have to do is get up and go to the refrigerator, but you can't. You think to yourself, what's the point? It doesn't matter. And then you end up just sitting on the couch. Even though you know all you have to do is get up and go get the water, you don't even have the energy to go do that. That's what it feels like to have this low grade of depression. And I had it all through college. And once I got out of college, I had it all through my 20s and my first jobs. And it's just something that continued to happen. And during this time, right, during this time, both college and in my early 20s working, I was so focused on just making money or making good grades. That was the sole focus. That a lot of other things in my life just fell apart because they didn't matter to me. I was unhealthy. I weighed about 30 pounds heavier than I do now. I started smoking cigarettes, using tobacco because they would help me stay awake. That is what I want to go do because those are all things that help me go achieve my goal. It wasn't so much about having good health. In fact, when I lived in New York City, I once ate a slice of pizza every single day for 365 days, which is insane when I think about it now. But I did that because it was easy, it was convenient, allowed me to go out and accomplish my objectives. I was doing those things well. I was having great jobs, making a lot of money, working hard, seemingly on the right path, but I wasn't happy and I would still get sad. And then around that time, one day I just started running. I don't know why, but I just did. I was introduced to running when I was in high school. I ran 2 years across country. I was never good. I never I never went under 19 minutes in the 5K, so that's the quality of runner that I was. But I knew the basic mechanics of what it was. One day I just started running. Then I signed up for a half marathon in Staten Island. Must have been in 2009 or 2010. And haven't stopped since. And for me, running just became something that I started doing. I was in New York City at the time, and so I ran around Central Park, up and down First and Second Avenue, past United Nations, along the Hudson, along the East River, all in the Lower East Side, everywhere. I would just run, and it felt great. And I look back on it now, and I say to myself, and I think a lot of people might be able to relate to this, is that I feel like running saved my life because it gave me an antidote to depression. Before running, there was just swirl. I didn't really have a direction. I was just executing this plan to make money and get away from something. But with running, it gave me this long-term vision, this long-term destination of this is where I could go if I continue doing this path. No matter how bad of a day I had, I could always go run. I could have a good day running. Running always gave me a reason to get up the next day because there was something to go do. And so all of a sudden, I went from just existing in the world to having a path, literally a running path that I was on. And as a result, I started making other better decisions. I get my health back under control because it mattered now what I ate. Stopped smoking, using tobacco because those things didn't help me go do my goal. I was dating my now wife, and running allowed me to take a second and really appreciate this relationship and how spectacular and incredible the person I was with was. I could now appreciate having this person in my life and understanding why it makes sense to invest in this relationship more than I did before. And all of a sudden now I had a couple things that were going for me aside from just work that I could invest in and diversify my life. So stepping all that back to the actual book review itself, I never understood why running was able to help me with these depressive episodes. And in hindsight, I still have them occasionally now, but they're not nearly as severe as they used to be. And I can always recognize when they're happening, and I know what to do to get myself out of those funks. Whereas before it would just be a spontaneous something would happen. Now I can proactively make that happen. And for me, running has been able to do that. But I never understood how that could happen or why that could happen until I read this book. So Running is My Therapy is a profound book. Profound. It's written by Scott Douglas, written in 2018. Scott Douglas is a contributing editor at Runner's World. He has authored 8 other books about running, including the New York Times bestseller, Med for Mortals. He is an accomplished runner himself who ran much faster than a 19-minute 5K in high school and then in college. So he knows what he's talking about. The book is about 250 pages. It's not incredibly big pages or small print, so it's a very manageable read. It's organized into 12 chapters, and the chapters themselves are organized almost as topics related to therapy. So Chapter 1 is how running helps your brain. Chapter 2 is how running helps people with depression. Chapter 3, how running helps people with anxiety, improve your mood, antidepressants, etc. So that's how the book is organized. And the sources for the book are a mixture of clinical data. So he pulls upon some scientific studies. He also has his own personal experience, because what you learn in the book is that Scott has a story very similar to mine, actually, except he discovered running far earlier, and so that helped him. But he has a lot of personal experiences with therapists and antidepressants that he draws upon. And then the third source is his relationship with the running community, his relationship talking to other runners, to his running partners, etc., and accounting secondhand their experiences with running. So that's how the book's constructed. And getting to the recommendation, I obviously love this book because it explains so much about something that I figured out for myself but never understood why it worked, which is how running helps with depression. There are 3 chapters in this book that I really love. And the first one happens to be the first chapter, and it's about how running helps your brain. And I love this chapter because it's a chapter that is the most scientific of all the chapters in the book. It is 80% based almost exclusively on clinical and scientific data. And what the book explains a lot about is how running, the act of running, physically changes your brain. It actually causes your brain to grow with neurotropic agents in the brain that increases the size of the hippocampus and what that causes in your body. It's fascinating. It talks about how the brain actually increases the oxygen uptake, which makes sense, and allows your brain to get rewired, which is fascinating. So your brain literally changes from the act of running, which would make sense. If you do anything for a long period of time, you would expect something in your body to adapt, whether it be your legs getting stronger, your heart, your lung, whatever it is, your brain actually changes. So this chapter talks a lot about how your brain changes. My next chapter in this book talks a lot about how it talks about antidepressants. And in particular, it talks about how antidepressants are things like Prozac, Wellbutrin, Cymbalta, all the different commercials and the common prescriptions that you see, it talks about those. And it explains how antidepressants work, which is fascinating, how they work by inhibiting, encouraging different neurotransmitters. And what the book talks about through a mixture of both clinical and now personal experiences is how running actually mimics antidepressants. And there's a couple really good studies they cite in here about how running can be just as effective as taking an antidepressant. And it's fascinating because the science is there as well as some of the personal stories. And so I love that chapter because it explained it on a level of, we know antidepressants work from the pharmacological data, and understanding how running can produce a lot of the same responses is really interesting chapter and spoke to me a lot because of depression in general. And then there's a bunch of other chapters. The rest of them, there's so much good stuff about how running is great for mindfulness, how it's great for mental fortitude, for achieving goals, all these little soft skills, executive function skills that you might think running has. The book talks a lot about both in terms of, like I said, scientific data as well as personal stories. So there's a lot of great content in the book. Critique-wise, I can see some readers, especially some hardcore runners, taking issue a little bit with these sources as they go through the book. Runners by nature are more quantitative. They like to have data. They like to have science and analytics. And the book starts off strong in that area, right? The book is very much heavily rooted in the science and what the literature says. But as it goes on, it gets into some more of these topics, these executive function topics. There is a lot more personal anecdotes and personal opinion from both Scott as well as his running mates. Personally, it doesn't bother me. I kind of like it. I think it humanizes the book, and I think Scott's a credible enough person that you would take those things into consideration. But I can see how some runners might actually say, I'd rather just stick with the science and literature. So do know that as you get through the book, it does deviate a little bit from the science and gets more into the realm of personal opinion. Take it for what you did, for what you may. I personally like it. So in the end, overall, Running is My Therapy is a great book. It is a book that I think will help you understand how running can help yourself. At least it did for me. If the title of this book draws you in, like it did for me, there's a good chance you understand this idea of how running is your therapy. And if you are intrigued by the title because you do understand, because you've had personal experiences with this, whether it be episodes of depression, anxiety, or sadness, this book will help you understand how running can help you. And it will help you understand why running is working for you. And the reason why that's important is because I don't think you're ever going to be cured of these things. I think personally, I'm always going to have these episodes of depression or sadness, or maybe you're always going to have episodes of anxiety or what it may be. That doesn't go away. But I think if you understand how running helps you with those things, when you are having those episodes, it can help reinforce to you why it is worth it to get up and off the couch and go run. Because you know what's going to go happen. You know how your body, your brain, and your mood will change because you understand the basis behind it. And that might be just enough nudge to get you out of that funk sooner, which I think is completely worth it. Great book, powerful book. One of the more influential books that I've read. Highly recommend you guys check it out. Thanks for listening.